أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. اللهم إنا نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار. We begin as we always do by praising Allah Jalla Jalaluh and thanking Him. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infinitely and abundantly. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all and every blessing that He's given us. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of one another, the blessing of community, the blessing of Miftaah, the blessing of Michigan, even its driving. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every moment of Iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even invites the believers to believe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, aminu. O you who have faith, have faith. O you who believe, choose to believe. And every day, every hour, every moment in which we commit ourselves to La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, this is a moment worth cherishing, a moment worth celebrating. And so we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of this moment. We ask Allah Jalla Jalaluh to send His peace and blessings upon the best of creation, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. If I can ask the brothers, I feel like we may be lacking chairs for the sisters. Jazakumullah anna khairan, may Allah give you the thrones of Jannah. There actually is some gaps. Yeah, we can fill in the gaps inshallah ta'ala. ولكن على كل حال, in all circumstances, it is an absolute honor and pleasure to be here with each and every single one of you as we begin a series that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored me to do in the past. And every time I do it, I find myself more in love with the Imams of our tradition, more inspired by them, more in a state of admiration of every chapter of their life, and particularly their journeys of seeking knowledge. And subhanAllah, this series is truly an opportunity for us to discover some individuals that we may think we already know. It is also an opportunity for us to get a better understanding and appreciation for the tradition that we are a part of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, شَهِدَ اللَّهُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He testifies that He is Allah. And the angels testify that He is Allah. And the ulama testify that He is Allah. Some of the scholars of tafsir, they say this is the greatest praise in the Quran for the ulama, because it equates their testimony of Allah's oneness to come right after Allah and His angels. Like they are worthy of being categorized in terms of their credentials and their credibility in the same sentence as Allah and His angels. Think about how magnificent of a statement that is. So our scholars are not just individuals that have mastered sciences. Our scholars are not just individuals that have an academic background. Our scholars are role models. And they are role models in every single element of who we are. And let's face it that the nature of humanity is that all of us are followers of someone. And anyone who says, oh, I'm not a follower, I'm a leader, what they don't realize is that every leader is a follower of someone. All of us are followers. It's just simply your ability to identify who you are following. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran about the people of the hellfire. And we beg of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His most beautiful names and attributes that He saves us from the hellfire and saves our families and children from the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ يَتَحَاجُّونَ فِي النَّارِ فَيَقُولُ الضُّعَفَاءُ لِلَّذِينَ اسْتَكْبَرُوا إِنَّا كُنَّا لَكُمْ تَبَعًا. The people of the hellfire, the weak from amongst them, the followers from amongst them, they tell those that were arrogant and those that were leading, we just followed you. Now that we followed you, and we followed you all the way to the hellfire, can you save us from just a little bit of the hellfire? They say now is a time that we can do nothing for ourselves, let alone anything for you. So we are all followers of someone. The purpose of this series, insha'Allah ta'ala, is that we are an ummah of great honor. We are an ummah with Imams like no other. We have giants that we can follow. We have legends that we aspire to become like. And spending a little bit of time unraveling and unpacking their journeys is a way for us, insha'Allah ta'ala, to become like them and to understand them and to be inspired by them, insha'Allah ta'ala. And we begin with none other than Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Imam Al-A'zam. Some people said, are you starting with Al-Imam Abu Hanifa because you're a Hanafi? I said, the good news is I'm not a Hanafi. They said, is it because you're at Miftaah? I said, that is a possible factor in the matter. But the greatest reason is because chronologically, he is the first of them. And not only is he the first of them, but he is known as Al-Imam Al-A'zam. He was the seed that gave birth to the trilogy and the fellowship of Imams that came after him. So it would be unbefitting for us to begin with anyone other than Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And subhanAllah, even in the unpacking of lessons and benefits and so on, it is very difficult to begin anywhere else than with the role model of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And I would argue that subhanAllah, within the example of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, we find many parallels to our own lives as well, inshallah ta'ala. But before we even talk about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, I want us to have the framework that these Imams are Imams of knowledge. These Imams are Imams of adab and akhlaq. These Imams are Imams of advocacy for justice and activism. These Imams are Imams in times of trials and tribulations. These Imams are Imams in times of social unrest. These Imams were Imams in their homes before they were Imams in the community. These Imams, rahmatullahi ala al-jami', they were Imams in every single element of their life. And so to recognize that our tradition is not one that compartmentalizes religiosity and spirituality and academia from day-to-day life, rather the remnants of their scholarship is something that is very clearly present in every single part of who they were. That's why they were thinkers, they were warriors, they are ambassadors, they are revivers, they are a people who by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it wasn't for them, we would not have Islam as it is today. And so we beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His most noble names and attributes that He rewards Al-Imam Abu Hanifa and Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i and Al-Imam Malik and Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi ala al-jami'. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward them an abundant reward, and that He subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to be in the gardens of Jannah with them. And something worth noting is that, and we don't say this for the sake of disrespect, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, one thing that you'll observe is that within their own lifetimes, there were individuals that were more knowledgeable than them. There were individuals that were more trained in particular sciences than them. There were individuals that even had stronger students of knowledge in some capacities than them. Some of them even more famous at the time that they were alive than the Imams themselves. But what makes these four Imams so incredible is the type of tawfiq or divine facilitation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to them. And it's a shout out to all of us who never feel like we're the smartest guy in the room. It's a shout out to all of us that might feel like we are average as students of knowledge or average Muslims. These Imams were anything but average. But even within their times, there were people that excelled beyond them in certain areas, and yet Allah Ta'ala gave them a special type of success. That 1400 years later, we're sitting here in Michigan and we're talking about them and we're learning their lives. And so one of the first lessons that we learn is all of us can leave a legacy of greatness. And all of us can cultivate a life that the trajectory of its impact is something that can be felt for generations after us. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayh is an example of that. And that's why there's an authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he tells us that every single qarn, or every single group of 100 years, there will be an individual or a group of individuals who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilizes them to revive that deen. Sometimes we feel like there was the era of Islam and now we live in an era that's the not so Islamic era. And we just look back at that to like, almost like to look back at it for romanticism and enjoyment. When in reality, our deen is a universal deen, no doubt, but our deen is also a timeless tradition as well. And part of it is that every single 100 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selects and honors a single individual or a group of individuals to be the revivers of that deen. And it is our belief that these 4 Imams are amongst those that were revivers of the deen at that time. So the question is, when you look at yourself in the mirror, my dear sister and brother, do you see a reviver of the deen? Do you see a preserver of the Quran? Do you see a protector to the Sunnah? And even beyond what you see in the mirror, what about what you look in your life and you take a look around? Do you see the lifestyle of a person who is holding on to this deen like it is a torch that lights a darkened world? In a time when we are witnessing a genocide and a massacre happening across the world, in a time when we witness homelessness and hunger across the world like we've never seen it before, in a time when we see environmental crisis that is wreaking havoc on every part of the earth around us, are we revivers of La ilaha illallah? Are we revivers of Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That is what made this generation and these people the greatest individuals to ever walk this earth. And so we ask Allah Ta'ala to be pleased with them and to make us amongst them. And the other is that one of the most awkward things that you experience in life is when you realize that you are a living sign of the Day of Judgment. I remember one time my father, Hafidahullah, was attending a dars. And I walked into the dars and I saw my dad, and I just needed car keys. You know that moment when you're young and your parents are somewhere you don't want to be and you just want to go to the car. So I walked up to my dad and I gave him salam. And I didn't say salam to anyone else in the halaqah. And I just asked him for the car keys. Like, I was just trying to dip, you know? And so I asked my father for the car keys, and then I started to leave. The Shaykh said, stop right there. You are a sign of the Day of Judgment. And I was like, la hawla wa la quwwata. I started to look around me. I was like, is it my socks? Is it my thobe? Like, what's wrong with me? And he said, it is a sign of Day of Judgment that you see people that you know are Muslim and you don't give them salam because you don't know them. And that's why we begin every gathering saying salam to people we don't know so that we don't end up being a sign of the Day of Judgment in a derogatory sense. But another sign of the Day of Judgment is that you live in a time in which knowledge is disappearing. And in fact, the hadith says it is being snatched away. Like it's being removed from that society. And we, in many regards, are living in an era of that. An era in which deen is being taken from unfiltered, unqualified, unpreserved sources. And what that is leading to is that individuals that are highly qualified, individuals that are part of a silsila dhahabiyya or a golden chain of scholarly transmission, are being sidelined and ignored because they're not funny enough, they're not cool enough, they're not swagged out enough. And then we are putting in the forefront individuals who quite literally should not be speaking. And while it may feel like knowledge is being removed from around us by others, in reality, we may be the ones disqualifying the authentic knowledge ourselves. And so one of the reasons why we go back to the examples of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala is, this is your legacy. This is your heritage. Yeah, maybe you make the best hydro biryani in town. Yeah, maybe you're from Syria or Palestine or Somalia or what have you. These are a part of our heritage that we honor, but Imam Abu Hanifa is as much a part of who you are as any other part of who you are. And who are we to abandon our heritage? Who are we to abandon our legacy? When your children, when you become more obsessed with people that are playing sports and with actors that are performing and with other individuals in our society, and we can speak more of them, influencers, than we can about Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi wa al-jami'. This is a problem. And I want to highlight something because my intention here is not to say that we need to have an informational overload. In our tradition, the measure of knowing someone is not the number of facts that you can say about them. In our tradition, in this deen, the way that you indicate you know someone is how much you love them, how much you pray for them, and how much you follow them. how much you love them, how much you pray for them, and how much you follow them. And that is the manifestation of what it truly means to know Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an. And so this is just an introductory reminder for all of us to really not view this as storytelling. If you came here for storytelling, I hope I do a good job. But this to me is not about storytelling. This is not even about just honoring the people of our past. This is realizing that that past is what makes us who we are. And that our world right now, I would argue, is in need of new Imam Abu Hanifas. New individuals who tread this earth and walk it with the perspective of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa and with the type of dignity that he brought forward, insha'Allah ta'ala. And today we live in an era of competition. There's a lot of competitiveness. Competitiveness in regards to wealth, competitiveness in regards to status, clout, all of these things. Compete to be like the great Imams of our past, insha'Allah ta'ala. As we begin, I just want to also encourage folks to continue in the process of us speaking about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, to make dua for him. As we mentioned him, if you hear me say rahmatullahi alayh, then you as well say rahmatullahi alayh. And this will be a means of reward for Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, as well as a source of reward for you. Remember, when you make dua for someone, what happens? The angels make dua for you. What about then if you're making dua for one of the people of knowledge or one of the people of Allah? Think about how the angels may respond to that. The other thing worth noting is that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh, and all of the Imams, they did not come out of thin air. They came from an environment, they came from a culture, they came from a family dynamic that facilitated for them to become exactly who they were. And this is something that's critical because places like Miftaah and institutions like Miftaah are exactly the type of places and people that produce the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And I'm not saying this as a commercial for Miftaah, I promise. I'm saying this because we must recognize the goodness around us as we have it. And it doesn't just end with just shipping your kids off to schools, paying for their tuition, and hoping that things go exactly perfectly, but it is a testimony of the type of environments that produce scholarship. Scholarship comes from sincere parents and the dedicated work of scholars. You have to think about the mother of Al-Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. One of the most famous narrations that comes to us about his mother, in fact comes to us by Imam Malik himself, in which he says that his mother used to dress him like a scholar, right? And not for like cute pics to put on Instagram, but rather she dressed him like a scholar, and she would say, go to Rabi'at al-Ra'i, go to Rabi'a and become like him. Learn from his manners before you learn from his knowledge. Look at that perspective of a mother, not a helicopter mom or dad who's surrounding their kids all the time and judging everything that they do and trying to control them. Rather, a parent that develops their child's personality and then sends them out to the world to do great things. And the Imam Al-Shafi'i is a testament for those of us that may feel like our life is too crumbly to make a difference. And Imam Al-Shafi'i was born into orphanhood, but was born as an orphan. And he never even gazed upon his father's face. And his mother could have said, listen, I don't know how the next piece of bread is going to come on the table. What I need you to do is I need you to start making money real quick and get your act together, because that is going to be our key to actual sustenance. In fact, Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala from Gaza, and we ask Allah ta'ala to liberate Gaza from the oppressor, and we beg of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept its martyrs, and we ask Allah Jalla Jalaluhu through His most noble names and attributes that He allows us a visit to Gaza in this dunya, as well as a visit to the Gaza of Jannah. As she gave birth to him, and as he reached the age of 2, she prepared him to go out to the world, but she says, who do I have other than Muhammad? Who do I have other than him? And so she took her child and she became a part of his journey of seeking knowledge. And everywhere he went, she went with him. And she prepared him and she took care of him as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extended her life, and until her child grew older enough to care for himself. This is what parenthood looks like in the lives of these Imams, and this leads us to the parents of Al-Imam Al-A'zam, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, wa radiya anhu. And that is that. I'm gonna use the slides because sometimes we'll have a full deck of slides prepared and I will do nothing with them. And I promised myself that would not happen this time because I always have my own notes on the side. This looks so nice, doesn't it? But Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, one of the earliest stories that we have of him is a recognition that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa is uniquely from amongst the Imams, the one that is what? Non-Arab, right? And subhanAllah, the reality is that sometimes we feel like this is a compensational thing that we say to make the non-Arab feel more comfortable. And actually, it's really funny because sometimes people sincerely do it because of that, but it could actually become very, very uncomfortable for the Arabs very quickly, because if you go through the trajectory of the scholars of our tradition, in fact, quite literally, the vast majority of them are non-Arab. So it is less of a comfort move for the non-Arabs and more so a wake-up call for the Arab. And the Arab have nice justifications that they gave themselves. We were busy saving the economy. We were busy running the different, khilafah at that time. We were engaged in many different things. And yet the reality is that one of the greatest reasons why that leads us to Imam Abu Hanifa. I promise we're going to go through parts of his life today. One of the greatest reasons why that is because a lot of the scholars were the descendants of converts that came in flocks and caravans to the feet of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, wherever they found them. And because they had left everything behind them to be at the footsteps of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anil jamii', they gave birth to the greatest scholars of our tradition. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa is no different than that. He is a testament of an individual who was coming at a time of great transition, when the Ummah transitioned from being predominantly in the Arabian Peninsula to spreading across the world. And Imam Abu Hanifa is a proof that deen was being carried on the shoulders of people that had no Arab lineage, but instead carried the deen in their hearts rather than in their bloodlines. And so Imam Abu Hanifa was an imam in his own regard of all of those scholars that came from a non-Arab background. And one of the earliest narrations that we have about him is in fact a narration about his father. And his father was a tradesman, and he was a tradesman that was known for his upright business manners. And one of the narrations that yunsab ilayhi, or is attributed to him, is that Imam Abu Hanifa was at one point of time just a baby drinking from his mother. And this famous narration is a testimony to the strictness of the Ahnaf in certain regards, because it's following the trend of their teacher. And not just their teacher, but the father of their teacher. And that is that Imam Abu Hanifa was just at home with his mother. His mother became busy, lots going on at home, and a woman from the neighborhood came through, and the baby started to cry from hunger, and so she began to nurse baby Abu Hanifa al-Nu'man. And Imam Abu Hanifa's father, he walked into the house and he saw this to be the case, and he immediately said, "Take the child away." And he made baby Abu Hanifa regurgitate and throw up the milk that he drank. And he says, I can vouch for the halalness or the permissibility of what you consume for our child, but I have no way of vouching for what someone else consumes. And I fear that I allow my child to consume something that is questionable, that has a shubha in it, let alone something that has haram in it. Any greatness that we see in Al-Imam Abu Hanifa is a direct result, in connection at least, with the greatness of his parents. And that type of perspective of avoiding questionable matters and haram matters is something that we see the barakah of that in Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, as well as Al-Imam al-Bukhari and many others of our scholars. But that is one of the earliest narrations about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, is that his story begins with his father making him regurgitate the milk that he drank because he was concerned about the permissibility of it. I don't need to extract more lessons from that. You got the message. That if we want to create Al-Imam Abu Hanifa in our own lives and in our own selves, then we need to avoid the questionable measures. Don't you love how I said I don't need to name it, and then I went ahead and named it anyway? But the point is that we need to be actively, inshallah ta'ala, working towards that halal life for ourselves and that halal life for our offspring and our children. What was the society like that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala grew up in? And that is that he was, of course, raised in Al-Kufa. And there's many statements that can be said about Al-Kufa. And the reality is that Al-Kufa was a place that many of the Sahaba spoke about greatly, that many of them moved to. Hundreds, if not thousands, of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anil jamia moved to Al-Kufa. So you had this beacon of knowledge that was meant to be a hub of Islamic literacy for the entire world, coming out of Al-Kufa. And at the same time, what ended up happening is that while it was an academic hub, it also became an economic hub as well. And so you had, subhanallah, really the peak of civilization economically and the peak in many capacities of civilization educationally coming to the same place. And subhanallah, it was a place that was foreign at that time in many capacities to Islam. It wasn't from the initial phases of Islam. It's not Medina, it's not Mecca, it's not even Sham. It is Al-Kufa, and yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought Islam there. And that's why when I was in Medina, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and preserve our mashayikh, they always used to point out to us the history of places like Al-Kufa. And they said, what is to say that the places that you go to, some of the students were from China, some of the students were from America or the West, as far as Australia and Japan, what is to say that Islam will not rise there in the same way that it was rising in places like Al-Kufa? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Islam rises in those people, it rises in all of its forms, but the real rise of Islam in those environments is happening as a result of the scholarship that is rising at that time as well. So something worth noting is, of course, the environment. Now, one of the things that's unique about Al-Kufa is that, of course, a part of where a lot of the tension within the ummah was rising was also in Al-Kufa. The division, the sectarianism, and some of the fitan that took place was also coming out of Al-Kufa. And this is something that an individual can either get caught up in the fitna, right? We all know how easy it is today in this day and age to get caught up in the fitna, or an individual can rise above the ashes of that fitna. And that Imam Abu Hanifa is a proof of an individual that instead of allowing themselves to drown in the fitna, he actually was inspired by the fitna to be a medicine for his community that was truly in need of medicine to rise and recover and heal from the fitna that they were in. And this is a lesson for us in that we too come in societies of fitna. I mean, Michigan, you have all sorts of people of all ethnic backgrounds and all theological orientations and all methodological orientations. Thank God for the food scene you guys have here, because it makes up for some of that division and fitna. And what that affords us is the opportunity to really choose to be like Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, in that we can be a part of the healing and the recovery of that time. Something that's worth noting about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala is there was an ancestor of his that became Muslim. Who was that? Which generation? Anybody know which generation it was? It was who? It was, did you say his grandfather? Correct. What was his actual name? I mean, is Nu'man a Farisi name? Does anybody know his Farisi name? I don't mean to this is why people don't answer my questions, because then I put them on the spot. I apologize, Habib, but you know I love you. What was his actual name? $50 Qamariya gift card, inshallah. Qahwa gift card. No Googling allowed. I'll give you guys to the end of the session. Sometimes like you do enough istighfar and the wahi comes. Like not, starts with an M. An M. I wasn't going to repeat it again. I mean, it's a meme probably, right? I mean, or whatever is the Farisi equivalent. But regardless, it's not important. It's just something, a teaser to stir the pot a little bit. But he went by Nu'man. He went by Nu'man after his conversion. And in fact, something that's unique about him is that he was in fact a friend of Al-Imam Ali bin Abi Talib rahimahullah ta'ala. And this is to show us like wow, that's kind of like a big deal to say my grandfather was a friend of Al-Imam Ali bin Abi Talib rahimahullah ta'ala, that they had a camaraderie and a friendship that extended and for generations, that even the father of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala was able to say that I remember getting advice from my father's friend, Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And this is again a proof of when you surround yourself and your family with righteousness, that righteousness is inherited, right? The statements of the Salaf, أُحِبُّ الصَّالِحِينَ وَلَسْتُ مِنْهُم, right? I love the righteous and I'm not amongst them, but perhaps by being around them, I'll become a little bit like them. Fake it till you make it, right? And so we have a convert for all intents and purposes who found a beloved of the Prophet ﷺ and part of Ahlul Bayt and spent enough time with him. And he, in fact, from his descendants, from his close descendants, came Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an. And so Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala was, and I truly need to move at a faster pace for the sake of time, otherwise we will be here till Fajr. But something worth noting is that he grew up in a society that had a strong presence of the scholars, of the scholars who were the students of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And so after the lands of Iraq were conquered in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, many were sent there, but the most famous from amongst them, who dedicated much of their time to being sources of knowledge, were the likes of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiyallahu ta'ala anil jami'. But it is not to say that it was limited to them, because through history, hundreds, if not some equate over 1,000 of the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, they in fact migrated there. And again, the intention there was to create a stable environment that was away from Mecca and Medina, that could revive Islamic literacy external to the hubs of Mecca and Medina. And that's why, alhamdulillah, we see the likes of these scholars who invested time in developing students of knowledge. And amongst those students of knowledge is, in fact, Ash-Sha'bi. And Ash-Sha'bi was a student of many of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, and many of the Tabi'een himself. And Ash-Sha'bi, he was also known to have a particular lens of identifying people of goodness and tapping into them. And a proof of that is, in fact, none other than Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala radiya anh. Because unlike Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i, who in some narrations it said he memorized the Quran by 3 years old. If you think you're behind in life, just remember that Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i became a hafiz in some narrations by 3 years old. Right? I see my 3-year-old son and I'm like, we got to work on Surah Al-Fatiha together, right? But Al-Imam Abu Hanifa was different than that, in that he started his life as a boy of Persian descent, the child of tradesmen and business people, and he too himself had great business aspirations. And that was something, in fact, that he didn't leave at any point of time. He continued to be very passionate about business and about trade. And one time, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa was commuting to the marketplace. And as he was commuting to the marketplace, he happened to be traveling the same time as Ash-Sha'bi. And Ash-Sha'bi, he was just walking alongside him, or they were riding at the same time. And he came to me and he said, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to the marketplace. That's where I'm always going. I'm just going back and forth to the marketplace." He said, "What about you? Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to the masjid. I'm going to the masjid, there's halaqat of ilm there. That is a currency that doesn't expire. That is a currency that doesn't expire. And then he after engaging with him a little bit, he says, you have within you an intelligence that you would make a lot more of yourself in the masjid than you would by continuously commuting to the marketplace. If only you commuted to the masjid and to the halaqat of ilm in the same way that you commuted to the marketplace. And Imam Abu Hanifa is in the beginning of his business career, already making tons of cash, has his father's entire business to inherit and make something out of, and now he's just commuting to work. And as he's commuting to work, he runs into a scholar who completely shakes his worldview. It says, is this really how you want to spend your life? Is this what you want to make of yourself? So much more would be left of you if you gave yourself to the circles of knowledge the way you gave yourself to the circles of wealth. And then Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he then was complimented by Ash-Sha'bi. He says, I see in you a yaqadha. I see in you a level of spiritual awakening, and I see in you a level of inquisitiveness and intellectualism that would be far more suitable for the halaqat of ilm than it is that you be a person of business and trade. And I think I've mentioned before at some point of time, and I mentioned this for the sake of benefit, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, because sometimes these stories, they feel far. 1,000 years ago, Kufa. Anybody here ever been to Al-Kufa? I didn't think so, right? And so they feel far. How many of you have been to Chicago for the Mass ICNA convention? By a show of hands, right? Something to be proud of, right? I guess, right? I'm just joking. But I remember, I believe I mentioned to some of the students here, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and preserve them, and accept from them their path to knowledge. I remember mentioning to them, one of the most substantial traits of the Prophet ﷺ is that he, salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi, saw in a people a goodness and a light of khair that they didn't see in themselves. And that this is what allowed, people say that everyone thought that they were the most beloved of people to Rasulullah, right? Everyone thought they were do you think it's because he was walking around like Oprah giving everything away? There's a lot of generous people in the history of humanity. You give people things. If I give everyone here right now an iPhone 14, in a year, it's going to be lame. It's going to be lame. I don't even know what iPhone number we're at right now. But the point is that gifts that you give are expirational in nature. But when what you give to people is a value within themselves, that is something that they will never lose sight of. And so I was in the... I had been given this reminder by one of our mashayikh, and I was in the bazaar in the convention, because God knows we spend more time in the bazaar than we do in the actual sessions. I was in the bazaar pretending that I needed to buy something. Usually I'm looking for halal beef jerky. And I was looking for halal beef jerky, and I ran into a shab, beautiful young brother, wearing a Moroccan thobe, flowing hair. Why the physical details, I don't know. But regardless, he came up to me and he gave me a hug, and I said, you're Hafid, right? And he said, no, I'm not Hafid. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. I was like, man, you have the samt, like you have the light in your face and like the persona and the aura of a Hafid. May Allah make you from the Huffaz, because Allah does not place this in a person except so that they can go seek it. Then COVID happened, and may Allah protect us from ever experiencing COVID again. After COVID, I was in the bazaar again looking for beef jerky. Wallahi al-azim. I kid you not. And I ran into him, and he came to me and he hugged me again. He had more hair, I had less hair, right? And he came to me and he said, do you remember me? And I said, I have to be honest with you. I have no idea who you are. But I know you, and I know that I love you, and I'm happy to see you. And he said, 2 years ago you told me that I should memorize the Quran because I had the samt or the aura or the light of a Hafid. He said, just last week I finished the Quran. Just last week I finished the Quran. I was like, man, you finished the Quran faster than I did. But subhanAllah, I remember feeling like, subhanAllah, like when I asked him if he was Hafid, he didn't say like, hey, I have like 10 juz down. Like he was like, me a Hafid? I just got this thobe on sale at the convention. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like it wasn't something that he saw in himself. But Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, think about Imam Abu Hanifa, think about his students, think about his legacy. It comes to us because Ash-Sha'bi saw in him the potential for him to become Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, Al-Imam Al-A'zam, to become one of the greatest Imams of our tradition, right? And so this is something that we must inherit and embody to those around us, insha'Allah ta'ala. And so Al-Imam Abu Hanifa carries his business tactics into his, business people are very strategic, right? Here's what we'll do. We'll take a 5-minute break so that you all can get snacks, because I want to take a sip of this, and it would be aib of me to drink without you all drinking. So I would invite you all to go. We'll take literally 5 minutes, not like Arab 5 minutes or Desi 5 minutes, actual 5 minutes. It's 8:01. We'll come back at 8:06 inshallah ta'ala, and we'll start back up. And we'll talk about Imam Abu Hanifa and his start of seeking knowledge inshallah ta'ala and what that looked like, okay? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب كل عمل يقربنا إلى حبك. Wallah, we ask you for your love and the love of those whom you love and love of the actions that you love. We ask of you, O Allah, to allow us to be from those who love you and those who die upon that which you love. Alhamdulillah, this is a good introduction. Naturally, we significantly went way beyond 8:06. ولكن على كل حال, no problem. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi wa alayhi al-jami', he realized that he wanted to give himself to seeking knowledge. And one of the things that he was interested in was pinpointing because of the strategic business individual that he was. It's all about, what is it all about in business? It's all about input and output, right? It's all about efficiency, strategy, and productivity. You can tell I don't do business, right? And yet, in that same mindset and with that same framework, he said, if I'm going to study knowledge, I want to pinpoint the area of knowledge that will be most productive, most positive, and have the greatest output for me. And so he started to think out loud with people around him that he knew to be students of knowledge. And that's why it's very important to learn to study with purpose, to learn to study with meaning, and to learn to study with goals, to be very much driven and objective with what you are learning and why you are learning that which you are learning. Right? Of course, we study for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this deen is carried on the shoulders of men and women like you all. And the more that we are able to identify what we wish to do with this knowledge, what we wish to produce from it, the more, insha'Allah ta'ala, we will be able to be impactful in the communities that we are in. And so Imam Abu Hanifa had a conversation with the students around him. And he said, what are the things that a person can study? Perhaps an individual can study the Quran. What happens if I study the Quran? They said, you can become a great qari. Well, what happens if I become a great qari? They said, if you become a great qari, then you can become a Quran teacher and you will produce qurra who will be better than you. He said, okay, that's fine. You study the Quran, you can be a qari, then you make qurra, and your students are a sign of a true good teacher is that what? Your students are better than you, right? And it's a sign of not only a good teacher, but a sincere teacher. And a teacher that always keeps everyone one step behind them. This is a little bit of an indication, nas'allahu al-afiyah, of an individual that has their own personal interests in mind. And so if you're naturally a good Quran teacher, then your students will surpass you, and you will be forgotten, and your students will be the imam, and you will be the one praying behind your students, right? So that's what his friends were telling him. Sometimes I'm like, who are these friends of Imam Abu Hanifa, right? Then he said, what about hadith? They said, you'll study the hadith, you'll understand the men of the hadith, the rijal of the hadith, the asanid of hadith, and then you will teach everyone the hadith, and then at one point of time, because of your old age, you will begin to narrate the narrations of the hadith, and you'll start to mess up because why? Because you're getting old. And then they'll start saying that you are no longer an authentic source of hadith. And now the students that you taught hadith to are telling people not to take hadith from you because you're old and wrinkly and forgetting hadith. And then he says, what about language? And they said that if you study the Arabic language, then you will be a teacher and you will get some money for it, but that will be the extent of it. Then he said, what about poetry? They said if you'll learn poetry, you'll get some money for praising people, and likely you'll end up getting imprisoned for speaking against people, so you're better off not going into poetry. He said, what about kalam? What about falsafa, like logic and rationale? They said ultimately you'll debate a whole lot of people. Sometimes you'll be right, sometimes you'll be wrong, but there isn't a lot that will come out of it at the end. They said, what about qada? What about becoming a judge by studying fiqh and law? They said if you do that, you will end up becoming a judge, and you will judge between people in situations, and you will become like the qadi or the actual official judge amongst them. Like you can be a judge of a city or a municipality or something along those lines. And he said that is where real impact is. To be a master of fiqh and to be a master of qada. To master Islamic law and to be able to judge between people based off of law. And subhanAllah, that was his conclusion. What did he do the next day? Started studying kalam. Like you just have to think about, like sometimes we look at these imams like these are these perfect people. He literally had this full-on discussion. Young man was just inspired by a Sha'bi to be a student of knowledge, broke it all down, said, you know what I really need to study? Fiqh. What does he go and study the next day? Kalam, mantiq, Islamic philosophy and rationale and logic. And he dedicated a good portion of time to study that. And he gave enough of his time to studying that he became known for that. That he was actually considered someone who, because of his inquisitiveness and the nature, he was a person that used to deliberate a lot, used to debate a lot, used to challenge a lot. And subhanAllah, one of the things that you realize is our path to knowledge is one that is very fluctuating, and it is healthy that it fluctuates. Don't let people tell you that you need to remain in your 10th year of seeking knowledge the same way that you were in your first year of seeking knowledge. In fact, you're changing and your evolution. A lot of people give a lot of famous shuyukh a lot of flack for changing. It would be problematic if they didn't evolve. It would be problematic if they stayed in their little echo chambers of everyone that dresses like them and everyone that talks like them and everyone that thinks like them, and they stay within the same cookie mold and they stay there in the same shape and perspective. You'll notice Al-Imam al-Shafi'i's madhab completely flipped. Al-Imam Ahmad's perspective strongly changed when it comes to hadith. Al-Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala was an individual whose evolution is very evident in his collection of the hadith as he collected the hadith. And so consistent, and Imam Abu Hanifa is no different in that he was constantly evolving in his path to seeking knowledge. And so likewise, you will start your path to knowledge somewhere, it will evolve, and guess what? You will make mistakes, and it will only really be a mistake if you don't recognize that it was something that you needed to change from. Otherwise, it's not even really a mistake as much as it is just a path of your studying knowledge. Because one of the things that we can say categorically and factually about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa is he concluded, quite literally, yes, I should go study fiqh, and yet he engaged in falsafa and mantiq for a significant portion of time, and he became the greatest defense of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah in his time. That there was a lot of Khariji, like the Khawarij and their rhetoric and their theological perspectives and a lot of influences of external theologies. And Al-Imam al-Shafi'i in his era was the individual that was disqualifying and discrediting and debunking a lot of their theories in the process of what? Not studying what he was supposed to study. And so this is a testament that whatever chapter of knowledge that you're in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed you in it for a reason and to maximize the potentiality that it gives you. And so he studied and he practiced in Islamic philosophy and rationale and logic, what is referred to as falsafa and mantiq for an extended period of time. He studied it. He was a master debater and deliberator. And he was actually engaging, because part of the task of seeking knowledge is that you are a part of the hifz al-din, the preservation of the deen. Some people, their role in preserving the deen is defensive. Some people, their role in preserving the deen is what? Offensive, right? And there's a larger conversation that we can have surrounding that. And so falsafa and mantiq and kalam is an area of logic and rationale and philosophy that preserves the deen from a defensive perspective. That these are the theological and academic attacks or accusations made against the deen. This is how we're responding to them. So Imam Abu Hanifa was living in this world for some time, until one day he was sitting in a masjid and he was teaching his falsafa and mantiq, and an auntie came into the masjid and she asked a question surrounding divorce. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I can give you all the theological, philosophical rationale, arguments that you want, but I cannot answer your question as to what is the right way for such and such a sister to be divorced in a way that aligns with the Quran and Sunnah. And he said, but you know who I know knows the answer? A scholar by the name of Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. And so he points at him and he says, go to him. And like it was spreading butter on toast, Hamad answered her question. Imam Hamad answered her question without even blinking twice, like it was a very clear and easy thing. And Imam Abu Hanifa had the humility. This is where humility is so important. When you become a master in something, it's very easy to become unaware of how little you know in other spaces. You're just like, man, like I got this area on lock. And so you begin to be like an imposter in other areas where you have no qualifications. But Imam Abu Hanifa was like, all my rationale, all my mantiq, all my kalam, all my falsafa did nothing to serve a general Muslim who just wanted an answer on whether she was divorced or not, or what is the right way that this divorce goes about happening. He says it didn't serve her. And he says that moment, subhanAllah, look at his humility and his sincerity. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make us from those who are sincere. He said, that moment, I decided to become a student of knowledge. That moment, I decided to become a student of knowledge, particularly in fiqh, after already being considered a allama, a scholar in every regard, in the areas of falsafa and mantiq and kalam ila akhirih. So he studied under al-Imam Hamad rahimahullah ta'ala ibn Abi Sulaiman for an extended period of time. And Hamad realized how much of a sacrifice that was, so much so that he allowed Imam Abu Hanifa to be his number one student. And that's why our Shaykh used to always say, don't just be a student, be the number one student. Don't just be a student, be the very best student. And that sounds like a nice commercial, right? But what it really is a testament that when a person is doing something in the path of seeking knowledge, not to accept being mediocre in their path of seeking knowledge, but instead to strive for excellence. So he was the number one student of Imam Hamad rahimahullah ta'ala, and he remained in that state for 10 years. Right now, an individual, akramakumullah, they do 1 year of online studies with Miftaah and they think that they're the mufti of their city, right? Or they go and they study in some of these institutes and seminaries across America. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept the goodness that they offer. And it is nothing against the institutes are doing a service for the ummah that for some of us who are a little bit older, we didn't even dream that these things would ever be possible. And so we ask Allah Ta'ala to bless these seminaries and these institutions. And yet one of the mistakes of the students and not these seminaries themselves is that you'll go and you'll study for 1 year and 2 years and you'll come out and you'll be like, by the way, my name is Shaykh Fulan. Like his mother and father saw him as a baby and named him Shaykh, right? It's like, remain humble, ya akhi. At the very least, call yourself, at the very most, we are tulab ilm. At the very most, we are students of knowledge, right? I was just talking the other day with one of the mashaykh and he said, subhanallah, today, like mashyakha or becoming a sheikh has become like a professional career. As like to say I'm a sheikh is like to give a qualification to yourself in a sense. When in general in our tradition, this is a reverential title that's given by others to you, not from you to yourself, right? And the same thing for ustada and shaykha and so on. So we need to be conscious of these things. That Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala was ready to completely pivot his life to become a student of Imam Hamad rahimahullah ta'ala, and he studied with him for 10 years. 10 years he studied by his side. Something very interesting took place during this time. And that is that one day Al-Imam Abu Hanifa was like, you know what, it's been 10 years. I'm not just a student, I'm a top student of Imam Hamad. And I think it's time that I begin teaching. Right? There's like this really interesting place where you transition from being a student to a teacher. And some people think that you are either a student or a teacher. When in our tradition, the best teachers are those that remain students. And if your teacher is no longer a student, then he should no longer be your teacher. He or she should no longer be your teacher, right? And so Imam Abu Hanifa, he says, you know what, today I'm going to walk into the masjid, I'm going to start my own halaqah. And he's walking into the masjid of Imam, into the same masjid where Imam Hamad has his halaqah. And he says that today I'm going to start my halaqah. As he's walking in, who is beginning his halaqah? Imam Hamad is beginning his halaqah. And he says, it didn't bother me that I was starting my halaqah as much as it was bothering me that I was missing out on the halaqah of Imam Hamad, my teacher. And so he says, I didn't start my halaqah not out of a hesitancy to start my halaqah, but out of a fear of missing out on being in the halaqah of Imam Hamad. He said, I took my shoes and I moved over and I sat exactly in my place next to my shaykh. He says, my shaykh barely started his dars before a man came rushing in, disrupting our dars and saying, O Imam Hamad, it is necessary for you immediately to leave to Al-Basra because of some family responsibilities and affairs that you have, and you are the one who has been mukaffal or placed responsible to handle these familial affairs of a relative of yours. And look at just, again, it's a statement not just of Imam Abu Hanifa, but also of Imam Hamad. He said, there's people who I have a greater responsibility in the eyes of Allah. I have hundreds of students in front of me, but who I am more responsible for right now is my family, my relatives. And so he said, I'm going to leave my halaqah in the hands of my top student, Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala. This is what it means to seek knowledge bimashi'atillah, to seek knowledge in the path of Allah. You don't open doors for yourself, Allah opens doors for you. And let me tell you, my dear brothers, you can open however many doors for yourself. It will never compare to Allah opening doors for you. And you can feel it when Allah opens doors for you. And so Imam Abu Hanifa said, in the same night that I wanted to start a halaqah for myself, and it would have, at the very least, strained things between me and my shaykh, he says, in that same night, I sat in the seat of my shaykh, and I taught the students of my shaykh. I taught individuals that were my colleagues 5 minutes ago, now were my students and learning from me. This is إن الله بهذا الدين وبهذا الكتاب وبهذه السنة يرفع بها أقوام ويضع بها آخرين. That through this tradition, Allah elevates some people and Allah humbles some people. Who does Allah elevate? The people who give all of themselves sincerely for this deen, wanting nothing from it but this deen, right? Not wanting mansib, positionality, clout, fame, or wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates them in a way that others are not elevated. He said, we remained in this state for about 2 months. He said, in this 2 months, besides teaching the class, I was asked of 60 matters that I did not hear directly the answer from my shaykh about them. 60 matters that I had never heard Imam Hamad answer. So he said, and look again, like, he did not take off the cloak of like, I'm a student, and put on the cloak of like, hey, who's the shaykh? I'm the shaykh, right? Like he was like, man, My sheikh's not here. People are asking me questions. I never heard the answer from my. He didn't even say like cut and paste. The sheikh said this here. The sheikh said that there. Let me put them together and here's a nice little package for you. He said every question that I was asked, I recorded the exact question, and every answer that I gave, I recorded the exact answer. And when my sheikh came back after dealing with his family affairs for 2 months, I sat down and we went through all 60 questions, every single last one of them together. What they asked, how they asked it, what I answered, and how I answered it. Today, I'll tell you that I did a Hajj workshop the other day. Every time someone in the audience asked me a question, and I'm no one to be asked, let alone to be answering, before they finished asking their questions, the 3 khaltus and ammus around them answered the question before I answered the question. Because people have, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them because they're sincere, and I am more confident in their sincerity than I am in my own sincerity. Allah, I don't say that to like sound nice. I assume the best of them and we know the best of them. But there's something I'm highlighting there is sometimes we have jur'ah or courage fi ghayri mahalliha, in a misplaced level of courage. And sometimes that's courage to speak on behalf of Allah and His Messenger, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, in areas where we really shouldn't have that type of courage, especially when there's someone else who can have that, who can do it, because we're far better off with them answering it than us answering it, right? And subhanAllah, on the way here, I was telling one of the brothers, may Allah bless and protect him and grant him a righteous spouse. You can tell he's single. I was telling him that that in life we're far better off being a naqil of the tradition than like a transmitter of the tradition than we are people that are cooking up our own opinions. Because when we're cooking up our own opinions, we are either one, wrong, or we're feeling a sense of originality in what we say of our tradition that is false. Because anything that you come up with, anytime like I was reflecting on an ayah and I was like, man, this tafsir is dope, like qala Tariq, right? I go back to the books of tafsir, either it's completely, my tafsir is batil and should never be repeated out loud, or someone from the tradition said it far better than me 1,000 years ago. No, Tariq's statement doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So we need to, like, from this moment of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi's life, we see a student who remained a student and a scholar that remained a scholar, Imam Hamad rahmatullahi alayhi, and their shared commitment to hifz al-deen, their shared commitment to preserving the deen, because it was never about Imam Abu Hanifa. It was never about Imam Hamad. It was rahmatullahi alayhi al-jami'. It was always about the knowledge that they carried and the task that they had. Ala kulli hal, in all circumstances, they went ahead and they went through the 60 cases. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Hamad, the conclusion was that they agreed on how many? I'm sorry? No. They agreed on 40 and they disagreed. It was better than that, alhamdulillah. They agreed on 40. This is like a bad fundraising dinner, right? They agreed on 40 and they disagreed on 20. And like, imagine again, subhanallah, sometimes you'll talk to people and they'll be like, this is, you just follow a different thing than me. Imam Abu Hanifa could have said, here we are, 10 years in the making. This is why I agree with you on these 40, and this is why and remember, what's the nature of Imam Abu Hanifa? He's a person that loves to debate. He's a person that loves to deliberate. He's a person that loves to be challenged, to have complete like showdowns with people to prove them wrong. What was his immediate realization? His immediate realization was that there was so much more that I hadn't learned yet from Imam Hamad. He didn't debate him on one of those 20. He says, all I know now is how much I don't know. All I know now is how much I don't know. And he spent another 8 years with him. He said, that day I promised Allah I would not leave Imam Hamad until he passed away. And he remained with him for the remainder of his life, which was approximately another 8 years. And this is Imam Abu Hanifa with his Shaykh. And it's a testament of his humility. And there's too many other benefits that we can take from that, but he remained by his side for 18 years. But after that point, he expanded his circle of seeking knowledge. And so he started to learn from Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the great scholars who is a direct student of who? Ibrahim al-Nakha'i is a direct student of Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Anytime you doubt things with the Ahnaf, you just say Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, right? 9 times out of 10 you'll be right, right? And so that is the some of the teachers that he brought into his life, particularly Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. And so the chain, they say, is of course that you have Imam Abu Hanifa, who's the student of Hamad, who is also the student of Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, who is the student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, as well as the student of Abdullah ibn Abbas, who are the direct students of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who is a direct student of Angel Jibreel alayhi salam, who is a direct receiver of Allah Jalla Jalaluh. And so, I mean, I am a Shafi'i, but we don't have a chain like that, right? Our chain is noble for other reasons. Some can say it's a superior chain, right? All jokes aside, but that chain right there is some of what makes Al-Imam Abu Hanifa Al-Imam Al-A'zam, and part of it is that it is what makes the Hanafi madhab preserved and protected in the way that it was. And that's why the debating of the legitimacy and the value of Imam Abu Hanifa and his madhab is one that is on very, very, very weak ground, unsubstantiated ground, to the extent that our mashayikh used to say, we don't refute those who illegitimize Imam Abu Hanifa because they've illegitimized themselves by illegitimizing Imam Abu Hanifa. I feel like I need to draw that out for you. We don't debate with those who illegitimize Imam Abu Hanifa and his madhab because they have illegitimized themselves by illegitimizing Imam Abu Hanifa. Right? You don't waste your time with them. That's what we learned from our mashayikh who were not Hanafi. That's what we learned from our mashayikh that were not Hanafi. And of course, there's also Sa'id ibn Jubayr as well, and too much can be said about him as well. One of the things that allowed Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab to be very well-rounded is numerous things. Part of it is, in fact, his knowledge of falsafa and mantiq that combined with hadith and combined with fiqh was what produced this unique perspective on Islamic law that was very different from the other madhahib, right? Because it combined between rationale and logic with the tradition. The other thing that it did was that made the Hanafi perspective extremely different, truly, honestly, uniquely different from any other madhab, is how well-traveled Al-Imam Abu Hanifa was. And not just how well-traveled he was, but simply the fact that he performed Hajj 55 times in his life. Right? Like the fact that he performed Hajj that many times. And Hajj back then wasn't like a package with Dar es-Salam where you go with your favorite mashayikh and you stay in the move-in pick. Hajj used to be like this conference where fuqaha and ulama and scholars and a'imma would come together. They would debate and they would discuss and they would unpack and they would unravel and they would explore and they would challenge and they would come with fiqhi conclusions together. That is something that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa was deeply involved in, and that is in fact why he performed Hajj 55 times, was because he would go and he would find himself studying at the feet of scholars from across the world, including studying from one of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Who was the Sahabi that he studied with? Of course, he studied from Ja'far as-Sadiq, this is true, but also he studied from Anas ibn Malik, who was Khadimu Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. He would study from him in Hajj, and he would also study from him when Anas ibn Malik would travel to Kufa. And so this is something that he became famous for, his connection with Anas ibn Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, and his studying from him. And another one of the teachers of, and there are too many teachers, subhanAllah, that we can talk about. There's also Hisham ibn Urwa ibn Zubayr, and there's a lot to be said about him as well. But subhanAllah, like when we talk about a series on the scholars, the giants of scholars that we have, these are all people that, wallahi, they deserve so much time for us to unpack their lives, and we ask Allah Ta'ala to afford us that opportunity. Perhaps this series can start with the four Imams, but then can extend to some of the other Imams of our tradition. But one of the more famous ones was Ata. And Ata is one of the more famous teachers of Imam Abu Hanifa for a number of reasons. One is that Ata was a slave that was then free, was later freed. And Ata's background was that he was from African descent. And Ata's background was that he had lost his sight. And Ata's background was that he had a physical deformity. And Ata's background is that he actually had a level of physical paralysis. It is like challenge upon challenge upon challenge upon challenge, and Ata became one of, if not the most knowledgeable people in his entire area, and debatably one of the most knowledgeable people on the face of the earth at his time. And yet he was a person with a disability, a person from an unelevated and a lowered social status, a person who had lost their physical sight, a person of no financial prosperity from a dunyawi sense, and yet he was quite literally one of the most pronounced teachers of Imam Abu Hanifa and many others of that time. And one incident that comes to us, and of course one of the things that's known about Nafi', one of the things that's known about Ata is that Ata was a direct student of over 500 of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Over 500 of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, Ata studied from them, rahmatullahi alayh. One time, in one of the 55 pilgrimages that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala did, he sat down. This is a narration that comes to us from Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, and it's one of the ones that just, again, it's an invitation into Imam Abu Hanifa as a student while he is a teacher, right? While he is a teacher. He enters to go get his haircut. And he goes and Imam Abu Hanifa, you know that in areas of business, interestingly enough, as a businessman, he has very strong positions on very, very unique conditions when it comes to business. I know there's Hanafis here, so I'm being very particular with my words, right? He has very unique prerequisites to business transactions. So he's in ihram. He's trying to get out of the state of ihram. The great Imam needs to get a haircut. So he goes to the barber and he says, I need a haircut. He says, sit down and let's cut your hair. He says, how much? He says, you're talking about ibadah. There is no conditions for fulfilling a ibadah. You're trying to get a haircut. He says, oh man, I didn't even think of it like that. I just thought of it as a haircut. He said, no, this is not a haircut for looking beautiful. This is a haircut to get you out of the manasik. We can't do business on something like that. Meaning that you can give me whatever you want, but this is not a business transaction, right? So he said, he sat down in the chair. He's like, man, this barber knows a lot. And then Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, leans his head for the barber to start, and he leans the left side of his head for him to start on the left. He says, no. Lean your head the other way, my guy. Give me the right side of your head. He says, oh, I didn't even think about that. And then the barber said, Bismillah. And he started, he was going to start cutting his hair. And then he asked him, he says, why aren't you facing the Qibla? He says, you need to face the Qibla. He said, oh, I didn't know this is a thing. He said, all right, let's face the Qibla. He faces the Qibla. And then he starts cutting his hair from the right-hand side. He says, aren't you finishing your Hajj? He says, yes. He says, then why aren't you saying the takbirat? If you're finishing your Hajj, then you need to be doing the takbirat. So he starts doing the takbirat. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Lillahi alhamd. Then he finishes the haircut, and he's doing these takbirat, and then he gives him whatever amount without any conditioning between them, and then he starts walking away. He says, whoa, where are you going? You need to pray your 2 rak'at. You just finished your conditions of Hajj. You need to pray the 2 rak'at. And this is something within the Hanafi madhab that is a practice, which is once you complete an act of ibadah, and specifically things that are part of the manasik, that you pray 2 rak'at. That's why if you go to Hajj and Umrah, you see a bunch of people at the end of Safa parked on the side, causing a ruckus, praying 2 rak'at. Those are the Hanafis, right? May Allah bless them. And so he said, where are you going? You're praying you didn't pray the 2 rak'at. And so he prayed the 2 rak'at. He said, listen, I love you and everything, but you're a barber. Like, where did you learn that? He said, this is what we learned from Ata. This is what we learned from Ata. He says, one time Ata came to me and he taught me this is what you do with the Hujjaj. And Imam Abu Hanifa says, he says, Rahimahullahu Ata, khayrahu la yu'qal. He says, may Allah have mercy on Ata. His goodness is not even something that we can comprehend. So this is Imam Abu Hanifa speaking of the greatness of his own teacher, inshaAllah ta'ala. I'm thinking that we need a prayer break. I don't know what time y'all pray here. Oh, we have time. MashaAllah. And perhaps we will wrap up by then, inshallah ta'ala. Well, that's good to know. Inshallah, you all can pray Isha peacefully at home.
No, I mean, like, I don't know when you're planning on finishing. But
Yes, Jazakumullah khairan. We'll keep going, inshallah ta'ala, for the time being. I appreciate the point of reference. I am trying to think of, we're talking about his teachers, and I would like to begin to unravel unpack more of his journey of seeking knowledge. I also wanted to point out this narration. That's a very beautiful narration that's authentically in Muslim, that is hung up in every Hanafi household. That many of the scholars say that it is Allahu A'lam ala hasab ijtihadina, in reference to al-Imam al-A'zam, al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, radiyallahu anhu. This is a beautiful narration that connects the Prophet ﷺ to Sayyidina Salman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. One of the things that people don't know about Salman is that there is a moment in which Salman radiallahu ta'ala anhu went from being a companion to being a part of what? Ahl al-Bayt. He's considered part of Ahl al-Bayt. People are looking at me like, but how? Right? And that is that, of course, in the Battle of Al-Khandaq, there was debate amongst the Ansar and the Muhajirin of what camp he lies in. And the Prophet ﷺ had the perfect resolution for them. He's not from the Ansar. The Ansar said he's from Ansar because y'all found him in Medina. The Muhajirin said he's from the Muhajirin because if anybody migrated, God knows it's this man, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ always had a unique relationship with Salman, because on that day, the Prophet ﷺ adopted Salman to be from Ahl al-Bayt. And so this is a narration in which the Prophet ﷺ shows his unique love of Salman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he indicates that love extends not just to Salman but to the people of Salman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, to the Persians, and many will say that this is in reference to al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an. And again, this is a unique thing that is extended to Imam Abu Hanifa in that there's a narration that indicates of him that does not exist for any of the 4 Imams around them. One of the things that I mentioned earlier that perhaps we can sit with for a moment is that, a lot of, like right now you might feel like Imam Abu Hanifa was the most loved man on earth. Is that true? Well, one could believe that based off of what I've said. However, the reality is that Imam Abu Hanifa actually had a lot of people that were jealous of him, envious of him, challenged him, disqualified him, spoke ill of him. And part of it is because of where Al-Imam Abu Hanifa came from. And part of it is because the more successful you are in life, the more haters that you have, generally speaking. And sometimes the people that hate you are the people that you wish love you the most. And yet this is in the insana khuliqa. I'm sorry, I heard 3 variations of the ayah. The human being was created in a state of halwa, right? Halwa is the state of panic and confusion, where you're always constantly wanting more of it for you and less of it for for others. And so when people saw Imam Abu Hanifa's climbing and he became Imam of Al-Kufa and he became the Imam of Al-Iraq, and now he was going to Hajj every year and people were going to Hajj to meet Imam Abu Hanifa, and some of the likes of Anas ibn Malik were telling people, take your deen from Imam Abu Hanifa. It's like, whoa, who is this man? So there was a lot of rhetoric. As much as there was positive rhetoric around Imam Abu Hanifa, there was equally attacks and ill speech around Imam Abu Hanifa. And one of this, and sometimes the only thing you hear about people is the problematic things that you hear of them. And so there was a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, who was part of the family of the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, and his name is Muhammad al-Baqir, rahmatullahi alayhi. And one time he met with Imam Abu Hanifa during the Hajj, and he says, are you An-Nu'man, the one that they call Imam Abu Hanifa? And he says, yes. He says, you are the ones changing the deen. Think about this great first conversation. You guys are the ones that are changing the deen from what my grandfather brought it to be. Think about how much that probably pierced the heart of Imam Abu Hanifa, the lover of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, he says that you are from amongst those who changed the deen, like you and your people, not completely accusing Imam Abu Hanifa himself, but saying that this is what we know about your people. And so Imam Abu Hanifa, he could, one of the things that you'll notice about Imam Abu Hanifa is his patience and his forbearance, or what is referred to in Arabic as al-hilm. Like, man, someone tells you like you're changing the deen, like that's worse than them insulting your mother and father combined, right? And especially when it's someone that you wish to love you and you to love them. And he says, perhaps if you sit, I can speak to you. And he says, and he sat with him, and he said, and he sat him on the pulpit, and he sat at his feet. He says, this is how we were taught to engage with the family of Rasulullah. Look at the humility. Imam Abu Hanifa was showcasing to us the Hanafi methodology of treating Ahlul Bayt. He says, this is how we were taught to treat Ahlul Bayt, that you sit on thrones and we sit on the floor next to you. And so he sat with them, and he said, I just have 3 questions to ask you. He said the first thing is, are men weaker or are women weaker? And although today that is probably a questionable place to begin a conversation, but the answer of Muhammad al-Baqir was very quick, and he said, of course, in the natural, instinctive sense of a human being, that a woman is created in a sense where she is physically in a lesser position than a man, umuman, like as a general principle. And of course did not word it in the sensitive way that I have worded it now out of fear of offending my sisters, right? And so he said, of course, women are weaker than men. And he said, and yet you say, and Allah says, and the Messenger of Allah, your grandfather says, that in inheritance, that a man gets 2 portions where a woman gets 1 portion, that that the man gets in some regards double the portion of a woman. When from a logical perspective, and you all are saying that we change the deen through our logic, from a logical perspective, one would assume that the weaker one gets more, and yet we are saying that the one that is stronger gets more. And this is to show you that we are in alignment with the Quran and Sunnah and with the deen of your grandfather, not in alignment with our logic or rationale that you are assuming is changing our deen. You guys see what he did there? He's showing that his number 1 dutifulness is to qala Allah wa qala Rasul. And this, ila yawmina hadha, till 2024, one of the strongest false accusations and illegitimate accusations against the Hanafi madhab is that in the name of rationale and logic, that Ahl al-Ra'i methodology is one that is given greater precedence than Allah said and His Messenger said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he's bringing this as proof that we follow the same trend when it comes to inheritance, that even though the woman is weaker and the man is stronger in a sense, that the man gets 2 portions while the woman only gets 1. Then he says, My second question to you is salah more important, or is fasting more important? He said, no doubt, salah is more important, and fasting is less important than salah. He said, and this is what Allah says, and what His Messenger, your grandfather ﷺ, says, and this is what we say too. Even though from a logical perspective, when a woman is on her menses, that what she makes up is, what does she make up? She makes up the fast, but does she make up her prayers? She doesn't make up her prayers. Very good, brothers. You're learning, mashallah, right? And this is a testament to what? This is a testament that we don't give priority to rationale or logic over what Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. He gave another example in terms of how we purify ourselves from urine versus sperm. That the purification from the najis one is a minor purification, right? You only do wudu when you urinate. May Allah honor you. Akramakumullah wa ajallakum. But when a person is in a state of janaba, while there's a general disagreement on the permissibility, on the purity or the impurity of sperm, but that generally one would assume that it is a higher level of janaba, at least, or a higher level of impurity, and yet the purification processes are what? Are the opposite, right? And this is a testament again that the Hanafi madhab is as much as it is loyal and a beneficiary of logic and rationale, mantiq and kalam and philosophy, but it is not loyal to it in a way that is at the detriment of the Quran and the authentic sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. When he gave these arguments, Muhammad al-Baqir, who is a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ and a scholar in his own regard, he stood up, he came off the throne, he placed Imam Abu Hanifa on the seat that he was sitting on, and he kissed him on his forehead, and he says, these are the true inheritors of my grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why do I mention this? I mention this because, again, Imam Abu Hanifa could have gotten upset. Imam Abu Hanifa could have stormed away. But Imam Abu Hanifa utilized his intelligence and his forbearance and his patience to actually be a means of goodness for those who are around him. And this is one of the things that is known about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. But one of the things that you'll notice we haven't spoken of is his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in intimacy. And one of the narrations that comes to us from one of the people of Al-Kufa is that he says that one day I had a question for Imam Abu Hanifa after Isha, but I saw that he had started to pray his sunnah, and in that Isha prayer, Imam Abu Hanifa had recited Surah Al-Zalzala. And another narration that says he heard the Imam recite Surah Al-Zalzala. And when I remember, subhanAllah, Surah Al-Zalzala in this story is particularly unique because it reminds me of my Hafiz Sahib in Surah Al-Zalzala when I was young. You know you're in a problematic place when you enter your personal stories into the life of Imam Abu Hanifa. May Allah guide me and forgive me. But I remember my Hafiz Sahib, I was reciting to him Surah Al-Zalzala, and I had no particularly beautiful recitation, and yet I could tell that he was being that he was being overtaken with emotion by Surah Al-Zalzala, and I was surprised by that, and I asked him why. He says, go and sit in the corner and recite Surah Al-Zalzala until you feel it. And subhanAllah, I'll tell you with no hesitation that I read it over a dozen times, if not 30 times, before I felt Surah Al-Zalzala. Like actually, my God, like thinking about that reality of فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seeing everything in the shaking of the earth and the day that the earth will speak up and say what is going on right now, right? And Imam Abu Hanifa heard Surah Al-Zalzala in Salatul Isha, and he sat down reflecting on it and thinking about it and making dua based off of it. And the person remained, waiting to ask Imam Abu Hanifa a question for him to finish him being in devotional worship until the time of Adhan al-Fajr came, and he was still in the same state. Reflecting on Surah Al-Zalzala from the completion of Isha prayer until the Adhan of Fajr. I know this sounds like a Disney movie. These are real things that tell us of the type of place these people were with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's in subtle things as well. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he was known that he didn't dress best for the rulers. He didn't dress best for weddings. He didn't dress best for parties. He looked the best and showcased himself the best, not even for his halaqah. Some of the scholars like Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, he was known that when he would go to his halaqah, he was decked out like he was going to his own walima, right? Imam Abu Hanifa was different. That's not when he was fully dressed in the best possible way. When was Imam Abu Hanifa dressed the best? When he was preparing to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, what sultan is there to stand in front of other than the sultan of Allah? Who better to present myself in front of other than Allah Jalla Jalaluhu in a way that who is worthy of such a presentation other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And so he would beautify himself for salah in a way that he didn't beautify himself for anybody else. One of the things we mentioned, his trips to Hajj, and subhanAllah, I even debated making the entire dars today just about Imam Abu Hanifa in Hajj, because Hajj season is coming up. Anyone going to Hajj? Anyone going to Hajj? None of you? La ilaha. Well, some of you are secret Hujjaj. I'll find you, inshallah. No, I'm just joking. Oh, because he's preparing for Hajj. MashaAllah. Give him our salam. Tell him my name is Tariq Musleh when I need some dua, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. But subhanAllah, one of the things that's known about Imam Abu Hanifa in his Hajj is that he would spend the defaulted position of Imam Abu Hanifa in Hajj is that he was doing tawaf. In the days, he would spend the days with the ulama, and in the nights, he would spend the nights doing tawaf. Consistently, to the extent that one of the Salaf said, there wasn't an hour of the night except that you would find Sa'id and Imam Abu Hanifa doing tawaf together. Scholars who spent the day discussing the deen and spent the night in worship of the deen together. This is the type of worship that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an was known for. And there's so much more to say about one of the things I can't miss is his tahajjud and his qiyam. And one of the things that I remember when I went to Medina and I was gonna start reciting Quran to one of the mashayikh, and he asked me, how many days a week do you fast? And I was like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah ya Shaykh. I said, Shaykh, we try to fast like outside, I reminded him that Muslims fast Ramadan. I said, outside of Ramadan, try to fast like the white days, things like that. And he said, no, if you're a student of knowledge, you fast at least one day a week. And then he said, how many qiyam do you do? And I said, Shaykh, inshallah ta'ala, we do qiyam, inshallah, jazakumullah khair. He said, no, if you're a student of knowledge, a week doesn't go by without qiyam. And he said, هذا لطويل بالعلم. If you know Arabic, you know what is طويلب? طويلب is like a chotawala, like just a small student of knowledge. Just showed up on the first day, with a nice little new kufi or topi. You're just showing up on your first day, new soap from Amazon. You're just trying to get by. That's the least that's expected of you. It was from the sunnah of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahmatullahi alayh, that tahajjud was a part of his daily routine. One of the students, he said that after the dars ended at Isha, that the Shaykh was found reciting, and he came across the ayah, فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَوَقَانَا عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ. That Allah favored us so greatly and He saved us from the terrible punishment. He said, I heard Imam Abu Hanifa repeating this ayah again and again and again and again until I thought that he wouldn't stop repeating it. That Allah favored us so greatly and He saved us from the punishment. That Allah favored us so greatly and He saved us from the punishment. And this is, subhanAllah, exactly what we hear of some of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, including Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, doing very similar things, taking an ayah and sitting with it in salah for hours on end. Because sometimes, my dear brothers and sisters, akramakumullah, may Allah honor you, the heart has hardened so much that you need to sit with a verse long enough for the rust to fade away, for you to feel the verse. You know, what do we say that the Quran does? The Quran gives us life, but sometimes you need to sit with it long enough to give you life. Right? And that's why, going back to Hafiz Sahib rahimahullah ta'ala, he says the Quran is not hard, it's your heart that's hard. Okay, relax. Take a deep breath, right? But subhanAllah, just that reality that sometimes we think that it's our deen that's difficult, but maybe it's the position we've placed with ourselves, with Allah, that is what is truly difficult. Imam Abu Hanifa became who he was not because of his intellectual capabilities, not because of his inquisitiveness, but because of who he was first and foremost with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he didn't just have forbearance in worship, but instead, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he had forbearance with the creation as well. And a testament to this is, there's too many, subhanAllah, that come to mind. But one of the incidents of Imam Abu Hanifa that's worth noting is, again, another Hajj example. And that is that Imam Abu Hanifa was in the manasik of Hajj, and someone asked him a question. And he's just minding his own business doing Hajj. Someone asked him a question, right? How many of you have been to Hajj? Shaitan, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your Hajj. And may Allah ta'ala write you from those who do 55 Hajj like Imam Abu Hanifa. Say Ameen. Inshallah. 55 Hajj is a lot. May Allah allow you to be wealthy enough to afford 55 Hajj. One time Imam Abu Hanifa was in Hajj. Someone approached him to answer a question. Someone else said, Imam al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala said such and such. He's saying, Imam Abu Hanifa gave an opinion. The guy said, hey, Imam al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala said such and such. He said, look at the response, and forgive me for the bluntness of what he said. He said, oh son of a Zaniya. He's in Hajj. Imam Abu Hanifa is in Hajj. And he responds to him and he says, I'm telling you that this is the truth, and Imam al-Hasan al-Basri was wrong in his position. He says, oh son of a Zaniya, I tell you Imam al-Hasan al-Basri says, and you say Imam al-Hasan al-Basri is wrong. He didn't just insult him, he insulted what? He insulted his mother. What did he say to him? He said to him, he says, yes, Imam al-Hasan al-Basri was wrong, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was right. Look at his perspective. What did we say? This was never about me. This was always about Allah and His Messenger, and the deen of Allah and the deen of His Messenger, salawatullahi wa sallam alayhi. Wasn't fazed, didn't clap back, didn't roll up his ihram and make a scene. And then there are too many scenes that happen in Hajj. It's like, okay, you're going to insult my mother, you're going to insult my family, you're going to do all of this. You said, Imam al-Hasan al-Basri says, I'm telling you what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu says. This is the forbearance of Imam Abu Hanifa. And that's why you cannot truly be a follower and lover of Imam Abu Hanifa without having this level of forbearance with the people, this patience with the people. Right, this level of ability to tolerate the roughness of people. This is a trait of the followers and the lovers of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. We haven't even gotten to his students. Some of his students gave him a hard time. Some of his students used to debate in front of each other and say, oh Shaykh, stay in your place. And Imam Abu Hanifa would gladly stay in front of them for hours on end. And then at the end they would say, okay Shaykh, now that we've talked for hours, which of us is correct? Imam Abu Hanifa was so patient with them. Not only that, but Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala would fund his students. This is a trait of his that no other Imam matched him in, right? By the end of this, you'll believe I'm Hanafi. That no other Imam funded his students like Imam Abu Hanifa did. In fact, it's said that one of the things that preserved and protected Imam Abu Hanifa is that he did exactly what Ash-Sha'bi did. What did Ash-Sha'bi do? Ash-Sha'bi saw the potentiality of Imam Abu Hanifa, saw the wit and the intelligence and the capacity and inquisitiveness of Imam Abu Hanifa, and said it would be a shame that all of this treasure would go to wealth instead of to knowledge. Imam Abu Hanifa did the same exact thing with his own students. even if they were not poor, even if they were not needy, even if they were not travelers. He said, dress like a scholar, act like a scholar, eat like a scholar, live like a scholar, pray like a scholar, and you will become a scholar. And that's why some of the greatest scholars in all of our tradition are the students of Imam Ahmad, of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, including who? Who was one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa? Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Right? Everyone is excited to mention the students of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. But oftentimes people forget that it includes Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which could help us to remove the beef between the Hanafis and the Hanbalis, inshallah. Right? ولكن على كل حال, all of this to say that he had a lot of forbearance, and particularly with students of knowledge. But one of the things that happens sometimes when people are stuck in the books is that they forget that our ilm is not ilm that is meant for the sake of ilm, but rather our ilm is meant to be a key to what? A key to amal, a path to action, and that it is meant to bring about change. That if an individual is the most knowledgeable amongst his community, but he's not doing anything with that knowledge, that the same knowledge that he would be honored for would be a knowledge that he is dishonored for, right? And so Imam Abu Hanifa shows us that was a knowledge that he shared with everyone around him. And one of the proofs of that was the experience of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala with his neighbor. This is a very famous narration that, subhanallah, is worth sitting with. And that is that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala radiyan, that he had a neighbor who was a shoemaker. Akramakumullah, may Allah honor you. And Imam Abu Hanifa would just mind his own business. He went to his dars, and his shoemaker neighbor went to his business. One of the things that the shoemaker used to do is on his way home, he would buy some alcohol. He would go into his house and he would drink this alcohol. And one of the things that he would do is he would get so drunk that he would sing. And he would always sing the same song. And Imam Abu Hanifa is awake doing what? Praying tahajjud. And he's praying tahajjud, and his neighbor with just a wall between them is getting drunk and singing. And one would imagine that it is from within the right of Imam Abu Hanifa to do what? To go file a complaint against his neighbor in the local courthouse, right? To go to town hall and say, listen, or the HOA, the local HOA, and be like, hey, take care of this guy, you know? Imam Abu Hanifa remained quiet. To the extent that one night, Imam Abu Hanifa is praying, and he's like, man, no drunkard singing tonight. And he used to sing always the same song. I'm lost and no one's looking to find me. I'm lost and there's no one looking to find me. One of the things that we don't know about the vices of sin is that the vices of sin people fall into because the pain that they can no longer manage oftentimes. And so Imam Abu Hanifa is like, that's peculiar. There's no one singing. So he goes and he inquires, and they say, oh, he was caught drunk, and so they dragged him to the prison. So he said, okay, I'm going to go. And now he's not in his neighborhood. He's not in his town. He's going to the entire city of Kufa is governor, the governor of Kufa. The governor of Kufa is seeing Imam Abu Hanifa at his doorstep at Fajr. He is elated. He's just excited. He says, let him come to me while riding his animal. Let him come to me at his peak. Let his ride place its hooves on my cushions. And he says, come the way that you are. And he says, open the doors for him and prepare a spread of food for him. He says, oh Imam Abu Hanifa, what do I have this pleasure and honor to host you for? He says, no big deal. I'm just here because I'm missing one of my neighbors and I think you may know where he is. Look at the sitr. Look at the sitr. He says, I'm missing one of my neighbors. Like there's a missing person alert. Now, hey, I got a neighbor, man. He's been getting drunk all along. And I was trying to tell y'all about him, but I chose not to say anything. But I am so glad y'all got him, right? No, he's think about what he's doing. He's disrupting his schedule. He's traveled the distance. He's going and he says, I have a missing neighbor. I was just wondering if you all had him. No conversation was had. That day, that governor said, because of the coming of Imam Abu Hanifa, everyone that was imprisoned that night will be freed. Everyone that was in prison, look at the barakah of Ahl al-Khayr. And you know what this did? This allowed it to be that the drunkard never became known to be the drunkard. Sitr, right? It was concealed. Because he was just let out while everybody else was let out, just like everybody else was let out. And he freed all of them. The drunkard came to Abu Hanifa and he said, "Thank you so much, I owe you everything, blah, blah, blah." He said, "I know you," look at the words of Imam Abu Hanifa. He says, "I know you felt lost for a long time and you were hoping for someone to find you. Do you finally feel found? Do you finally feel found?" He says, "Yes, I finally feel that I have been found." And from that day, he became a practicing righteous Muslim because of the care and the concern and the considerate nature of Al-Imam Al-A'zam, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, wa radiya an. The last thing is, how did Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, deal with disagreement? And one of the things worth noting is that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa's dealing with disagreement was one that is a reflection of how the Hanafi madhab generally deals with disagreement, which is with full dignity and with full engagement and respect and positive regard. And this is showcased in many, many, many examples, but one that I thought was kind of funny. Always try to end on a funny note before we talk about the martyrdom of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, which is that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa became aware that someone in his town spoke ill of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So he said, "Listen, man, what's this guy saying about Uthman?" He said, "Oh, he says that Uthman is a Jew." He says, "Oh, does he have a daughter?" They said, "Yes." He's like, "Perfect." So he goes to his house and he says, "Listen," this guy was elated. He's like, "Imam Abu Hanifa has never visited my house before." He says, "Not only is he visiting me, he's telling me he has someone for my daughter in marriage." He said, and he was being influenced by the Khawarij and so on. And that was the fitna of their time, is a lot of the Khariji rhetoric, right? And so he said, he was speaking ill of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala, the Nurayn, the one who married two daughters of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says, "I have someone for your daughter, amazing character, very righteous, worshipper, good in business, ethical in everything that they do, good family man, all of these things. He just has one aib. He only has one thing that he needs to work on." He says, "What's that?" "It sounds like a perfect candidate for my daughter." He says, "He's a Jew." He says, What do you mean he's a Jew?" He says, "Why would you bring me someone to marry my daughter? I don't care about all those other good things about him. Why would you bring someone to marry my daughter that's a Jew? All of that good that he has is negated by him being a Jew." He says, "And do you think that the Messenger of Allah would accept for his daughter that which you don't accept for your daughter? And do you think that Allah would accept for the daughters of the Messenger of Allah that which Allah does not accept for your daughter?" And at that moment, instantaneously, that man said, "Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh." And he repented and he realized how embarrassing and problematic it was for him to have such a perspective on Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Imam Abu Hanifa is Imam Abu Hanifa. He could have literally written that guy off. He could have even not cared about him. If he really cared about him, he could have just written a PDF about him and published it online and said, "This is why this guy sucks," right? This is how people refute people in 2024, is that we just publish these statements against each other and intahal kalam, right? And we celebrate this. Imam Abu Hanifa, instead of being content with disqualifying the person's perspective, Imam Abu Hanifa wanted guidance for them. And this is the Hanafi way, that you share the goodness of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has showcased with you to others. That's why it's very suitable that Jama'at al-Tabligh is strongly affiliated with the Hanafi madhab, because it is a part of the Hanafi sunnah or the tradition of Imam Abu Hanifa that you can't carry the treasure of this deen without feeling single-handedly obliged to spread it like wildfire to everyone around you, right? And this is in fact what Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala did. However, this did not disqualify him having strong positions on matters that today would be categorized as political. And this is a strong misconception of the Hanafi take, and the Hanafi perspective is that it is one that is disengaged from society, when in reality that the Hanafi positionality and the legacy of Imam Abu Hanifa is one that is strongly engaged with correcting societal norms, with rectifying the general masses, and with standing against injustice and oppression at all times. That is the legacy of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And it is in fact showcased to us in many, many, many situations, like even very subtle things. Like someone came to Imam Abu Hanifa from like Imam Abu Hanifa was in a gathering of like rulers and governors and these things. And one of the chieftains said, "Oh Imam Abu Hanifa, do you remember when you were young and such a situation took place?" And he was like trying to like hype up Imam Abu Hanifa and simultaneously hype himself up. Imam Abu Hanifa was like, no, I don't remember that at all. I have no recollection of that. One of his colleagues came up to me. He's like, listen, man, the chieftain is trying to like bond with you. He's trying to say like I got you, like we're together, like we have history, we go way back. Imam Abu Hanifa is like, I'm not gonna say that I know something happened when I don't know that happened. Like if he said something that I know happened, I'm gonna say that it happened. If I don't know, like I'm not gonna like fake it with him in order to impress him. I have no reason to stand with other than the truth, just to be standing in the lines of people who oftentimes engage in less than the truth. This is Imam Abu Hanifa being unapologetically against oppression in every one of its forms and standing with the truth in all of its situations. And this is a sign of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, always standing against the oppression, no matter where it came from. And this led to Imam Abu Hanifa having problems with the governors and the chieftains consistently. And one of the things, like an elephant in the room, that I want to name as we begin to wrap up, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your patience with me, is that it's worth noting that oftentimes this happened as a result of his adversaries and his like scholars of that time who had a problem with him continuously trying to throw Imam Abu Hanifa under the bus. Honestly, continuously trying to jeopardize him and jeopardize his legacy. And Imam Abu Hanifa's response to them was always the same. غفر الله لي إن كان صادقا وغفر الله له إن كان خاطئا. He says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me if what he says of me is true, and may Allah forgive him if what he said of me is false. Look at that perspective. All this noise about you, all of this talk about you. If what he said is true about me, then may Allah forgive me. And if what he said about me is false, then may Allah forgive him for saying something about me false. Never did he place himself in a situation where he was engaging with the falsehood by responding with falsehood. This is the legacy of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. And yet, subhanAllah, as he grew in his fame for his knowledge and for his intelligence and for the vastness of his wisdom, rahmatullahi alayh, he was summoned by a leader of that time by the name of Al-Mansur to become a judge. And the official judge of the land. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa passionately rejected it. He said, there is absolutely, positively no way that I am going to accept being a judge under your leadership. And he did so respectfully, and he did so understandably, and he did so in a way that did not discredit the governor. He was trying to be very precise about how he navigated that. And yet this leader would not take no for an answer. And there was voices around him that fed into the narrative that Imam Abu Hanifa was not recognizing you as the authentic leader of the time, and that's why he doesn't want to be a judge under your leader. And there was no truth to that, because Imam Abu Hanifa was very much living by the laws of the land at that time. And the proof is in everything else that we mentioned, of course, that he did. And yet it reached the point that Imam Abu Hanifa was in fact poisoned while he was imprisoned. for rejecting to be a judge under this governor. And as he was poisoned, Imam Abu Hanifa, before they gave him the poison, he said, I know that this is poison, and so I'm not going to drink it. So he continued to spit it out while they were pouring it by force into his mouth. And then as soon as they stopped pouring it into his mouth, he fell into sajda. And in fact, Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayh is one of the servants of Allah who returned to Allah while in the state of sajda. And do you need anything else to tell you of who he is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And these are not stories that make good movies. These are stories of people that gave their lives so that we can have Islam. This is a story of a man who traveled the earth on his feet until there were permanent cracks in his feet because of the pilgrimages that he made to preserve this deen. This is a man who lost his voice countlessly debating the Khawarij. Lost his voice countlessly debating those who were trying to reshape and corrupt this deen. This is a man who, after becoming a scholar on an international level in philosophy, sat at the feet of Hamad so that he can become a scholar of the Islamic tradition. This is a man who sacrificed every worldly matter of pursuit of business and instead became a server of this deen. And wallahi, I think we covered less than 10%, with no exaggeration. Less than 10% is me just trying to keep some dignity for myself, right? Less than 10% of what should be said, not even what could be said, but what should be said about Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. We didn't even talk enough about his teachers. We barely touched his students. We didn't even speak about his business. We didn't even talk about his family dynamic. We didn't even talk about the numerous times that he stood against injustice. We barely touched his ibadah. But what I hope we were able to highlight is that Al-Imam Abu Hanifa is my Imam and your Imam. And he is an Imam worth following, an Imam worth loving, a role model worth having, and someone that you become honored by honoring them. And so inshaAllah ta'ala, we will wrap up here for the sake of time. But it is my hope and my prayer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala with mercy and forgiveness, that Allah Jalla Jalaluh preserves and protects the legacy of Imam Abu Hanifa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows every second of this gathering to be a source of incredible reward for Al-Imam Al-A'zam, Imam Abu Hanifa. We ask Allah Jalla Jalaluh to allow us to be from those who follow him into Jannah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he allows our children to be from the descendants and the followers of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وجزاكم الله عنا خيرا.